I see some familiar faces, I see some new faces. I'm glad you joined us for our first panel on this main stage, and it's quite an interesting one. Our guests are going to talk about monetizing the metaverse and the rise of the creator business. Anyone here that has been to the metaverse, actually? How was it? Interesting. Anyone else? Okay, interesting. This is the first kind of metaverse vibe we have. I can't tell you anything because I haven't been to the metaverse, so I'm quite excited for the talk. Let me introduce you to Sam Russell, co-founder of Clef. Albert Gruber, co-founder and head of artist relations at Sequence. Markus Schwarzer, CEO of Cyanide. James Sutcliffe, VP Global Partnerships, Pixelinks. And then there's Eléonore Baillot, project manager at Pianity. She might be a tad late, so we're going to welcome her later. And please give a warm welcome to our moderator for this session, Silvia Montello, CEO of the Association for Electronic Music. And just a quick reminder for you, after this discussion, there will be a question and answer. So if you go into your swap card app that you all downloaded, for sure, there will be the possibility to ask questions that I will later on hand over to these people. But for now, enjoy the panel.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. So a quick recap on what we're going to be discussing today in this panel. Artepreneurs are taking the lead in creating tech-driven businesses that build on fair, transparent, and user-centric models. The speakers will give insight to their recent music and tech projects and explain why it's crucial to the future of the music and tech world that artists, producers, publishers, and managers build their own infrastructures that is focused on their needs. So we have a fantastic panel here, and what I'd like to do to start with is just invite everybody one by one to give a little bit more colour as to who they are, the company that they work for, and how that's positioned within the metaverse space. So I'll start with you, James.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm James Sutcliffe, VP of Global Partnerships for Pixelinks. Pixelinks is a business founded 18 months ago by Richie Horton, Deadmau5, and their management teams. Essentially, we're a business that is investing, building, and acquiring companies in the Web3 space, specifically focused around music. We're building infrastructure and standards that we hope will help to plug the music industry more firmly into the metaverse.
Thank you, James. Markus.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Markus. I'm the CEO from Cyanide, and Cyanide is a company where we use AI. We utilize AI to analyze music, and that can have various different use cases that we then service to the music industry. One of which we creative metadata tagging. So a lot of you artists out there probably know the pain of tagging your music after creating it. But you all know how important it is to distribute music actually. So our engine does that automatically. There are other use cases such as similarity search, where we can pull up similar sounding tracks to a reference track from a big music catalog. So you see already like the predominant use case being sync, but our connection to the metaverse actually is in a newest product that we're currently launching is where we created an AI which can literally understand music to a granularity which was needed to connect it to the virtual space. So back in the days, you couldn't connect really music to situations and activities. Now that is possible, and we're launching the new product soon. And love you all to check it out. Thank you.
Great. And Albert?
Yeah, hey, my name is Albert Gruber. I'm co-founder and head of artist relations at Sequence. We are a real-time music recognition platform, and we started in both IRL and streaming world, and expanding, of course, to the metaverse. We recognizing music in any source of audio formats, and letting the creators and the artists and the labels and all the other various stakeholders in the industry know when the music is being played, and that in real time. As an example, I'm a music producer, a DJ is playing my track in a club in Tokyo. I'm getting a live notification, DJ XY is playing your track there. At the same time, we're enabling these plays to be reported to the PROs so that the original artists are actually getting paid for the music performed. And the same in the Metaverse and in live streams, we're building like integrations for platforms like Twitch and YouTube so that fans can actually interact with the music. They can see which music is being played straight away, buy the music on their favorite platform or stream it so that actually the original producers get their reward for that and get their recognition. That's it.
Thank you. And finally, Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam Russell, co-founder of Clef. We're a artist-led and creator-first engagement platform. So we're really focusing on culture-led engagement. And one of our core beliefs is that musicians are they've got a lot more to them than just their music. So one of the things for us is around enabling musicians and the industry to monetize in new ways, find new ways for their fans and supporters to share money with them, to create new experiences. And my personal background is 7-8 years in blockchain, built one of the world's first KYC AML protocols. So I've been quite deep in the layer ones of blockchain technology for the last few years. So really excited of how blockchain, powers and enables a metaverse, but also how it can help musicians, to democratize the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm going to start with a kind of general question really around where you feel the biggest opportunities lie for creators and their managers in the electronic music space. Before I start, welcome Eléonore. Thank you so much. I'm glad you could make it. Would you like to just introduce yourself and Pianity and how, what space that has within the metaverse for our audience?
Of course. I'm Eléonore, and I'm a project manager at Pianity. And Pianity is an NFT marketplace for music NFTs, where artists can turn their music into limited editions and sell them to their fans. So thanks to this, the artists can share exclusive experiences with their fan and go to a new era of creation. And as for Metaverse, since Metaverse NFTs are pieces of the Metaverse, therefore we are part of it.
Great, thank you so much. So yes, let's have a general look at where everyone feels the biggest opportunities can lie for creators and managers, and specifically in the electronic music space. They've obviously been virtual concerts and DJ events. There are decentralized streaming services. There's audience engagement and kind of building a true fans model, and potentially other great opportunities. So just throwing it out to the panel, where do you think the key opportunities lie in your perspective?
I'll go. So it's quite a big question, but if you think around, like from my perspective, is as a musician, you need to identify who your fans are, who your supporters are, so you can then engage them the way they want to be engaged. Because, in a world of where we're living in today, is we've got audiences that want personalized material on demand. But can the artist actually fulfill that? So yeah, it's about identifying who your top fans are. The 1,000 fans, I think, is a really interesting one. But it comes down to really identifying who your fans are and how you can engage them. And there are different channels, such as streaming is a revenue channel, Metaverse is a revenue channel, such as advertising, B2B, it's all a revenue channel. But, what do your fans want and how do you want to, fulfill their expectations?
I would also say that looking at certainly the metaverse and the platforms and the technology that sit below them, the way that I kind of describe this to artists and to their management teams, this is a brand new canvas. Okay, so if you think back to when MTV first launched, it completely changed the way that artists presented themselves to the world and to their fans. Up until that point, we had radio and obviously the kind of the platforms before that, but MTV was kind of like a pivotal moment. And I really see the metaverse and the sort of Web3 technologies that sit behind it as a similar moment in time. Of course, MTV was a marketing platform. It was very much one way, but it allowed artists to now start to think about how they presented themselves visually. It even changed the way that music was written because people started to think about the visual. Well, with the Metaverse, you've got a new canvas through which you're able to present yourself to your fans, but also get them involved. You know, the whole thing about Web3 and the technologies behind it and things like NFTs is that it allows your fans to be able to invest into your projects. New formats, you mentioned live streaming and virtual concerts. But you've now got the ability to launch virtual merchandise. There's avatars. There's multiple different ways that you can now kind of incrementally monetize on top of your more traditional ways. And so I would start to think about and advise artists that, think of this as a like I said, a brand new canvas. And I think that, two major opportunities that come through the Metaverse and platforms is user-generated content. And AI. Now, those two things are quite massive sort of areas, and there's a whole conversation we could have here for an hour just around AI on its own. But if you look at the money that YouTube paid out last year, I think it was 80% of that was driven by user-generated or going to user-generated content. If you look at TikTok and the way TikTok has changed the music business in such a short space of time, this is very much user-generated content. It's people taking songs, slowing them down, pitching them up, doing stupid dances over the top of them, but creating viral hits out of the back of it through things like collection of stem files, remixing, minting new songs on-chain. This is user-generated content that I think we're not going to see the like in Web 2. So that's one thing. And the other, as I said, is AI. Artists' time is so short, and they're being asked more and more by labels, to post here, do this, perform here, do this brand deal, go to this charity event. AI is going to allow them to have a virtual version of themselves that is able to perform or to create content in these spaces without them physically having to be there. So I think that these two areas, and they're two massive pillars for our business that we're going to be sort of driving forward in the next year. That would be my kind of main take.
Could I add something? Yeah. Also, if you think about distribution, like I think the thing that the Metaverse will revolutionize for music distribution is that in the physical world, we of course to musical distribution or to consumption, we are bound to speakers, right? In the Metaverse, you can play out music everywhere. You can stand on the highest mountain, there will be music. You can be in the office, there will be music. You can be anywhere and there will be music, which will essentially also drive like branded experience, right? So we will see like a huge increase of that brands will also, like we see brands already going more and more into the sonic branding space, way more than it has been in 10 years ago, and that will only rise. Like, that you walk through the virtual space and you will recognize the branded experience based on the audible input. And I think there's a lot of, it sounds a little bit dystopian, and I'm totally subscribing to that as well. But there will be a lot of opportunities for artists to monetize their content in a different way, also powered by like you said, by artificial intelligence driven experiences.
Yeah, anybody else want to add, Elena?
I would also say that actually the new concept of Metaverse is an opportunity because it brings to the digital world the notions of authenticity and ownership. And this especially for artist creation is really important when you see that with the digital music and the streaming, that an artist could make a song, but the song, because of the possible duplication of the music file, the song will not carry value anymore. With Web3, it totally break free from this logic. So I think this is a great opportunity.
So, we've been mentioning about artists and kind of finding out who their fans are and being able to engage with their fans through different channels and different ways in the Metaverse. Would you say that there are particular demographics of creators and or their fans who are going to be the dominant forces in the growth of music and tech in the metaverse? Or is it open to all?
I would say that it is open to all, but it actually probably in the early stages right now, whilst the rights landscape is still so much of a grey area, that it really does give independent artists and artists that have got no thought in their mind about going and signing with a major record label who are class themselves as Web3 native artists. You've got a real opportunity if you are independent and you own all of your own rights to really take advantage of this space. Certainly when it comes to things like fractionalized ownership of music, as I mentioned earlier, user-generated content. With NFTs in particular, the thought of a fan being able to play with an artist's song, remix it, and mint that remix, and then being able to sell it, and then the onward secondary sales and the whole sort of conundrum around where the rights landscape sits and how things are kind of tracked and royalties paid and ownership. I think independent artists, certainly electronic music. I think electronic music has always been at the forefront of technology just because of the nature of how the music is made, and a lot of music artists in the space, certainly two of our founders, they look at themselves as technologists as well as music artists. And so I think from a demographic perspective, artist-wise, I think the electronic music industry is moving, probably is pushing the boundaries more, but as I said, I think independent artists certainly have a real huge opportunity right now. If you're signed to a major record label and a major publisher, it's an absolute minefield. It's still doable, but the depth of experience and the depth of what you can physically do with your music in the space is still limited, whilst PROs and the publishers and rights societies, etc., are all trying to figure out how this stuff is managed going forward.
To add to it, I think the demographics is an interesting one because I'm a Gen Y. I grew up on a mobile phone, I think 12 years old. So when you look at the new age of, there's Gen Zs, and then I think it's Gen Alpha, which are the super young ones, and they're going to be leading the world in 10 years. But the way that the younger generations are natively growing up on their phones, in the metaverse, in these new realms, in Roblox. Roblox is the metaverse. May not be, blockchain enabled yet, but it's the metaverse. And those demographics, I feel, the ones who have natively brought up in this ecosystem, they're going to succeed because they get the language, they get the incentive mechanics, they get the transparency, they get the whole features and benefits of the whole industry. Whereas, let's say my generation and older generations, it's a little bit new, it's a little bit different, it's a little bit obscure. And I think the next few years, when we see regulations and laws, and whether we like them or not, we need them to control the good players in the industry, because we can't enable bad players to succeed, and that's probably one of the risks. But demographics-wise, I think I would say Gen Zs are leading the way, but they're inspired by some of the older generations who have experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And everything we talk about in this room and other rooms like this, I think a lot of people focus about right now, and they, you might be you might not believe in it 100%, but think about Gen Alpha. I've got a daughter in that age range, and I see the way that she interacts.
How much does she spend on Roblox?
Ridiculous. Like, I bought a Balenciaga jacket for her avatar in Fortnite, and I'm so glad she doesn't know what Balenciaga means in the real world. But this is it. These kids now, they don't understand what these things mean physically, but to wear a Balenciaga jacket in Fortnite to hang out with her friends is the coolest thing that she could do. I'd rather spend $25 on that than, 10 times that in the real world. So yeah, think about the future generations coming through, and artists as well. There's artists that are gonna, in the next 5 to 10 years, that we don't even know about right now, and they will be 100% Web3 native artists. They won't sign record deals, they won't sign publishing deals. They will be sovereign in terms of their, financially, and in terms of their rights. And I think that's a really exciting thing. Is what we're talking about now is think about the next 5 years and the next 10 years, not what's right in front of us.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I suppose that kind of leads me on to where does that leave the metaverse for those of us that are Gen X, or God forbid, even older baby boomers? Is this something that you see a real barrier for adoption with the kind of older demographics who are maybe brought up on physical music and then transitioned into downloads and streaming, or do you not see that as being too much of a barrier?
I can go again. I don't want it just to be me talking. But no, just think about Facebook, right? When Facebook first came out, I know it's a slightly different concept, but, my dad would say, what the hell is that? Him and his mates are the only people on Facebook now, that age group, So whilst it takes a little while, for these things to kind of permeate, I think when these experiences or these platforms become mainstream and they just, the metaverse is, unfortunately, thanks to Mark Zuckerberg, has become kind of this thing that everyone just thinks is a dystopian world where we're all just going to be sat in our bedrooms. No, this is going to be this is the future of the internet. These spaces are, this is how social media platforms are going to evolve. You're going to go into 3D spaces and hang out with avatars rather than profile pictures. And, I think over time, people of older generations will flock. But it's one of those things that I think it just does take some time until it becomes mainstream. Then everybody piles in.
I absolutely agree with you on that. I think it needs a bit of a transition phase as well. People need to adapt through it. I think that's also our subject, to lead people or lead the different generations to that point where they are familiar with it. Same like it happened on Facebook, or my mom just visited last week, and she's in her 70s, and she's using YouTube and all the media platforms for consuming media and news. She's not using the typical television anymore because she knows she can get it on demand, and she wants to get into Instagram. Now she's into TikTok, she loves it. But just like slowly and steadily, sometimes it's a bit too much for her. And if I show her what's happening on streaming platforms or in the metaverse, it's still too much. But it will take time, and it will slowly, steadily help. Occur, especially also with the help of Gen Alphas and Gen Zs and so on. It's for myself, I'm gaming still a lot, in multiplayer online games, and I played with some people for years. I have never seen their face. I don't even know their real name. I know their nickname that they use in the game, and you are in a kind of closed metaverse in those games because you're running around, socializing and hanging out with those people just with a headset. And Gen Alphas, they're going to be fully into that. And I think it's just the next step of evolution in that kind. Usability is the thing, definitely, absolutely.
And I think part of this bridging, because current usability, let's say if we look at the metaverse and the Web3 space right now, current usability for new users it's really hard. And I don't mean to be a negative Nancy about all of this, but it is really difficult. 7 years in the space, I've been scammed a few times. I've lost funds left, right, and centre. But if my parents or older friends of mine were in this, they just wouldn't take it. It's too hard basket. So the next 2-3 years, there's going to be top of funnel user acquisition improvements that have to happen. And one of the kind of key things is there's this talk of custodial or non-custodial. If you own your keys, that means you own your crypto. If you trust someone else with your Balenciaga digital asset, or whatever it may be, and something goes wrong with their business, you lose your assets. So there's kind of the user onboarding space and top of funnel of how to use and engage with the metaverse that needs to be improved for significantly higher adoption.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to come on to crypto actually and adoption and you know the way in which that can be at the moment again a barrier for entry into the metaverse space. I had a look at some recent stats, and it looks as if the global percentage for total crypto wallet adoption is running at about 14% at the moment, and it's nearer to 10% in the US, which is the biggest music market. Out of that 14%, a subsection of those will be people that are actually adopting music within the metaverse space rather than sort of trading or different experiences. So do we think that that music and tech in the metaverse is reliant on the majority adopting crypto only, or do you see there being a sort of combination of crypto and fiat approach in accelerating the growth? How do you see that working?
I would say that the first people to adopt could totally be the crypto people, because they already know how it works. But it's not because they can be the first one to adopt it that the mass cannot come later and understand, thanks to these early adopters, how it works and how what improvements it can bring compared to Web 2.
Will it require the sort of regulations that we've touched on before to give people the confidence to get into the crypto space so that they can actually then get into the metaverse space?
I think so. I just think regulations need to happen. It's for customer protection, for even the artists and their teams. It's protecting their assets, and whether it's reproduction rights, licensing. But to your first point around, is it crypto or fiat? My belief is it's going to be a mix. Quite frankly, I want the choice. I want to be able to pay in whatever I want to be able to pay in. And whether it's a platform accepting that, it's whether they have the liquidity to, if I'm buying something, they need to pay an artist. Do they have the liquidity for the specific crypto I'm using so the artist can actually pay their rent? Because at the moment, it's convoluted, it's a little bit more complex, and there aren't really the rules and systems in place. But the next 2-3 years of me being able to pay with my credit card, to a QR code, use whatever currency I want, that's the outcome, and I think that's what the audiences want as well, is choice.
If I can add something, that's actually the choice that we've made at Pianity, is to allow people to pay by fiat and by crypto to ease the adoption of the product. And today we can see that we have a lot of people that are buying NFTs with fiat money.
Could I ask the crowd, actually, because this might be interesting. If I was to release something really cool and you all wanted to buy it today, raise your hands if you would buy it in crypto versus fiat. So crypto, two people. Who would buy it using euros or pounds or dollars? I'd probably pay crypto, but I think that gives you where we are now to where we could be, and maybe it's part of our jobs to make it more appealing and easier for you to pay in crypto in the future. But it's quite philosophical. At the end of the day, it's value is value.
I mean, to extend that point about sort of crypto, metaverse versus fiat, do you see the monetization opportunities in the metaverse being able to also drive monetization in Web 2 and in the physical space, or do you think that actually those revenue streams and monetizations should be kept separate?
No, I think there's a connection. Digital assets can have real world or real life utility and value. I mentioned earlier virtual wearables. There's platforms like Artifact who have been bought out by Nike, who are connecting digital and physical together. So I don't think that the two are separate. I think with like with anything, rather than as an artist, rather than just jumping into this for the sake of being involved, it needs a plan, and it needs careful consideration. And you can certainly use your Web3 activations and activity and collectibles to drive value in the real world. I honestly believe that. I don't think the two are separate. It may change down the line. There may be a tipping point where it does go this way, but I think, certainly, I think we're in this stage at the moment, Web 2.5. Like there's a lot of people who are kind of playing one foot in both worlds, and I think that's going to continue for a little while until things completely sort of transition over, as was the case between Web 1 and into Web 2. But no, from my personal opinion, I think that the two, can go hand in hand.
Anyone else?
I think they're a little bit different. But I feel that you've got, you can say Web 2 is a channel, Web 3 is a channel. Web 2 has an audience that we're used to communicating as we are today. We don't need to change anything. Web 3 requires, I think, a whole plethora of communications, marketing, planning. Requires different expectations to be managed. There's different revenue streams. When do you get those revenue streams? How do you deliver the revenue? And that's where, if I was a musician with a team around me, I'd be treating the metaverse as a new channel, like Instagram was to businesses 8 or 9 years ago. It's something that you must explore. If you're not there, you're missing out on a potential audience. But if you are there, you're learning what these new audiences might want, new ways that you can engage existing audiences, but also new ways to engage and appeal to completely new audiences. So, if you were to step back and look at the metaverse, it's a really exciting opportunity. You just need to decipher why it's right for you and if it's right for you, now or in the future.
That's a really good point. And you've actually touched on a couple of things there about communication and marketing in this space. And James also touched on the kind of planning in terms of what a creator is actually going to build and what channels are available and how to execute those. I mean, can you give any kind of examples or any intel in terms of how that communication and marketing works within the metaverse space at the moment?
Discord, sadly. I used to use Discord a lot until there were pretty much that's how businesses were valued upon, of how many members they had in their Discord channel. But really, communications is transparency. It's under promise and over deliver. That's how it should be in this world. However, what we've seen the last 18 months is probably a lot of over promising and under delivery. But communications, they're so vital, and it's just managing expectations as well as you can.
And I think the focus now for Web3 is much more on community, which, is that's there's plus and negatives to that, but ultimately, the ability to be able to really truly build community, it goes in back to that 1,000 fans theory, that you don't need, millions of fans following you on your platforms. You just need 1,000 who are willing to spend, a certain percentage of money on everything that you release. But fostering community is the single most important thing from a marketing perspective. The under-promising and over-delivering is important. The great thing about Web3 is that what I've found is that fans are much more willing to be open to this idea that not everything is going to be communicated up front right now. Certain things are going to be unknown. There's a whole load of projects out there that tease, an idea or tease a piece of artwork with not much more information behind it, but there's a roadmap, and communication then becomes really key in that. But building community now is much more than just posting on Instagram, for example, and getting a load of likes and getting a load of comments and some shares. This is a real two-way conversation that really allows artists to communicate and be in contact with their fan bases in a much more granular way. So I would say, 100%. For me personally, on our project and others that we've run, we're behind Dead Mouse's Heads project. We work with Richie on a lot of his stuff. The way that those guys communicate with their fan base in this world is completely different to how they communicate with them in other channels, and there's that connection is much closer and tighter, I think.
Talking about sort of creation of communities and communicating with fans and building that community and fan base, I mean, do you see the metaverse as a space where creators can build those communities from scratch within the metaverse, or is it more at this point in time more applicable to those like Richie who have already built up a fan base in Web 2 that they can bring with them on the journey? Where do you see it as a space where both can happen right now, or is that something that, you know, the kind of early stage creators are going to have to wait and build in the future within the metaverse entirely?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be easier or harder to grow an audience. It's going to be very different, because, you know, as I said before, you have a variety of different opportunities how to deliver music, and it will differ from how do you deliver music in the real world. You know, frankly, a lot of artists just hope they upload something to Artists for Spotify, and then the algorithm will do the rest of the work for them. But like in the metaverse, like you do have this like, you know, distinct data, or like a very precise data about people's activity, people's surrounding, people's social not status, but like are they in a social environment, etc. Right? And having the ability to plug your song into the right environment is gonna enable so much more than is potentially possible today, right? You know, you have this, and we've been working on this for 7 or 8 years. It's always been a fascination of mine, like, you know, what we call music moments, right? You walk down the street, you listen to that one song, or you're on a road trip with your mates, that song comes up, and it will stick forever, right? It will just somehow engrave into your brain, and then it's there, right? The opportunity of creating these music moments and thus, like, you know, bind yourself or like bind your audience to that song, there are huge opportunities there, and I guess artists, like new emerging artists, will succeed that really know how to play that right.
Again, fully agree with that. I think, as we've seen it with streaming already, we've seen artists come in that never played a live gig in their whole entire life, you know, and all of a sudden you follow them on Twitch and you watch them stream 2-3 times a week, and all of a sudden they got 70,000, 100,000 followers. I don't know how many thousands of them are subscribers. They're paying, they're donating. They got like 5 to 10 to 15,000 people watching those streams. I mean, show me those artists that can fill arenas with 10 to 15,000 people 4 days a week. You won't get that, you know, and they have that audience. They create the content and the people are watching, and you've never seen them live before on a stage. And some of them don't even want to play live. They don't want to go out and hustle and travel and all of this. They like to stream out of their bedroom, basically. And that enables so many people to do creative work, whatever they want to do. And that's the beauty about it, because then you can really creatively evolve as well. And
just to add to that, I think, you know, we've signed 10 Web3 native artists to kind of launch one of our projects, and, you know, working with artists at the Deadmau5 and Richie level as well, like the comparison of those conversations. So if you've got a massive fan base already, you have to bring a percentage of those people along on a journey, and the work that it takes to communicate to those people. Some may be believers in this space, some may not. You've got that thing of, am I going to alienate half of my fan base? You know, how do I talk to these people and explain to them what I'm doing, and that this isn't a money grab, you know? And you hear all of these scare stories of rug pull projects, etc. You know, these 10 Web3 artists, they've built communities that may not have, you know, millions of people in them, but they're natives in the space, that they've come up, you know, learn it, or, you know, that's how they've found these people. That's how they found these artists. And it's then a very easy communication. You're not having to explain to them, well, I'm a Web3 artist and this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm going to be and this is how you can interact with me. That's just, it's assumed already. But if you've got a big fan base and you're an established artist, it doesn't mean that you can't do it, but it just means that you have to think much more about how you communicate and how you bring those established fans along with you, because you can lose a lot of people on the way.
I think the key word there is being authentic. Authenticity, right? As an artist, if I want to play in Web 2 and the Metaverse, be open. Tell your Web 2 audience why you are participating in the Metaverse, why it excites you, what the fans in the Metaverse get from me that they don't in Web 2. And then this kind of just copy and paste and repeat, and slowly and surely audiences will migrate and move over. But at the same time, I think you definitely shouldn't ignore Web 2, because that's kind of where your audience has come from. That's why you are where you are today, probably because of your Web 2 audience, if you're not a Web 3 native artist. But authenticity, being true and purpose-led.
I would say also that with Web 2, you have a logic of looking for metrics, how many people are going to like your posts, comments, and so on. And with Web 3, you are more focused on the quality of the people that are part of your community. So therefore, your communication strategy obviously would not be the same, because you're not speaking to exactly the same people, and your communication in Web 3 will be more targeted to these special people.
Great, thank you. I want to turn slightly cynic for a moment. As we know, there are cynics out there in terms of the Web3 and Metaverse space. And I heard somebody in the audience earlier mutter the word Second Life, so I did. I was going to raise that. So the cynics may say that the music industry has already tried to engage with the virtual space. Second Life launched nearly 20 years ago now. It grew to 1 million regular users at its height within the first 10 years, and then kind of fallen back to about 800,000 regular users and plateaued. So how does the Metaverse now pose such an opportunity? What's changed versus the previous attempts from 20 odd years ago?
So I've never played Second Life.
I have.
But one thing I like, just looking at the kind of fundamentals, we've got better accessibility today, more internet covering more parts of the world than ever before. We've got latency, we've got quick speeds, download speeds, being able to have a million people. I can't remember Travis Scott on Fortnite. How many people tuned into that live stream? Millions. And the other thing is the evolution of hardware. Whether it's, for VR, AR, but also, full virtual reality, right? And that's where I feel, 20 years ago, Second Life to where we are now, there's just so much more accessibility and ability to scale. So I think cynicism is really important, but it's also the fundamentals of, we've come a hell of a long way from 20 years ago, from the technology infrastructure.
And I think that that was seen as niche as well, like Second Life. I remember it. I had a guy who worked in the business that I was at the time in accounts, and it was seen as just like a thing that sort of, computer nerds did in their bedroom. He had a whole life in that world. He didn't have a girlfriend in real life, but he had one in Second Life. So it was kind of seen as niche, but these spaces, these platforms, not even metaverse platforms, but just computer games, you think about, you mentioned earlier, you've got friends online who you've never seen before, but in games like FIFA and Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto, these things are mainstream now. So I think that's where the difference lies. It's not seen as kind of a something that weirdos do.
Yeah, we were some of those weirdo. I mean, we were forced to do one of our global annual conferences in Second Life when I worked for one of the 3 big major record companies back in the late 2000s. So we had to create an avatar and wander around a conference space trying to shake hands with people, and it was frankly awful. So I'm glad to hear that things have like moved on quite a lot now. But yeah, there will still be those cynics that kind of say, well, you know, that was all a bit rubbish, so how is it doing?
Bit of a fad? Is that the kind of, like, one of the words used is like it's a fad? It's
a bit of a fad. We've tried it before. Why is it different now? You know, Emperor's new clothes, that sort of, you know, those are the things.
Yeah, I can't remember any major companies, brands, etc. hiring, you know, Second Life officer, chief Second Life officer or whatnot, you know, but not on the scale that they are now. Like, you've got big brands hiring, you know, head of Web3, head of chief Metaverse officer. Like, it's not a fad. I mean, I could be wrong, but...
Yeah, but I mean, sorry.
No, I was just going to elaborate on my previous point was... I've forgotten it.
All right. Sorry, mate. It will come back. No, maybe I can be a little bit of a deflator or something. Like, I genuinely believe that the word and the mutter about it, the buzz about it is heavily inflated. Like, you know, that's why. And I'm sitting on the panel about like the opportunities there, but that's also something like, you know, consumption patterns. That's the big word that we're making a point on, right? It has caught up, but it's not there. Like, in terms of like how big the buzz is. And that people are hiring chief metaverse officers and all that, right? It's a good headline, but it's not justified with any sort of, like, you know, the general opportunity that it will emerge in the coming 5 years, right? It's heavily inflated, but nonetheless, it's a good way of you know, imagining the future, how these virtual spaces can enable businesses or artists or like anybody else out there to do great things. So it's good to think about it, but it's definitely nowhere near where we think it is. That's for sure.
I remembered my point. Second Life was one of how many metaverses years ago? One of one. And again, it's the definition of a metaverse. You know, I perceive that playing FIFA, you're in the metaverse, right? So probably another point is Second Life, one of one today. Tens of thousands of metaverses out there. You know, Sandbox, which 48 was it, or Decentraland, 48 users. You know, there's some with small amounts of users, and FIFA and Call of Duty with thousands, millions of users. How can you participate in these metaverses as a musician? There's sync opportunities, but how do we get there in the metaverse? And this is, you know, possibly something we can talk about is you know, new standards, because the music industry absolutely needs new standards to truly participate.
Yep.
And those standards need to be interoperable.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, a lot of people are thinking, well, how long is it going to take for the music industry with its current very complex web of music rights management? I mean, the way in which the music industry's music rights has grown over the years could not be more complicated if we tried. And that's something that's going to take more than a minute to untangle and try and actually create a basis which is going to be a lot more practical and really work for the fans as well as the creators and artists in the metaverse. It is starting to happen, and there's a lot of good brains on this already, looking at what the frameworks need to be, both legally and structurally. But just before we kind of head to some questions, I wanted to pick up on the AI point as well. You mentioned that AI provides a lot of opportunities in the metaverse space. I wanted to bring up actually a kind of a real world Web 2 concern about AI and AI created music that is troubling a lot of the current artist community, especially independent artists, where they're seeing on streaming platforms some AI-generated music now becoming more prolific on streaming platforms and therefore sort of taking away revenue shares for human creators. And in the gaming space in particular, there seem to be some moves that are a little bit concerning about some big gaming platforms looking at the adoption purely of AI-created music within their games, especially where it's sort of dynamic, so it changes according to gameplay. Do you think the concerns around AI-created music in the metaverse are genuine ones? Do you think that's something that is something that the human creators will really need to look out for in terms of how they can metaverse their art?
I think it comes down to like value proposition and what's the value proposition of artists creating music versus what's the value proposition of games music, because like there's a rare number of games that use original music, like Grand Theft Auto, maybe FIFA. I don't know. I'm not a big gamer, so that were the two that I could think of. But like as opposed to the ones that have originally created music for the game, that's way higher, right? So it's like essentially it's not a threat. Like AI created music in video games, it's not directly posing a threat to commercial music and original music. It's posing a threat to composers of that specific games music, right? So you'd also have to like see the music industry in these kind of silos, and then see the threat for that particular silo. I think AI created music is heavily inflated discussion. It's like you see a lot of great systems out there, stuff where you can really not distinct from original music. And no one really cares. Like it's like no one really does it. It's like no one really applies it and uses it. But everybody's super interested, right? And that I think that comes down to the fact that we're restricted by just music. Like there are only so many combinations of tones that you can put in an array, so make music, right? So it's not infinite. Not an infinite amount of music is possible there. And I really believe that probably every song that could have been written is already written out there. If you see the entity of production music that comes on top of that, and the stuff that is being produced in the bedrooms around the world, etc. Every song has been written. So it's down to like how well can you find this song that has already been written by human to put that into your whatever your use case is, right? Rather than like ask an AI to write that song again for you, just for cheaper and for like, putting somebody out of their job. I think that's basically what it comes down to.
Thanks.
I mentioned earlier about, how we're approaching AI in UGC, and I think artists should, rather than look at it as a threat, is an opportunity of, building AI into their strategy, working with it to create generative works based off their original compositions that allows them to free up time to do other things. It shouldn't just be one or the other. And you can't really build fandom around AI music on its own. And so I think whilst it will have a place, and of course there will be platforms that are, that do use it. Long term, as I said, fandom can't really be built around something like that doesn't have a face behind it or a personality behind it. Even virtual artists, you can build fandom around that. And there are virtual artists that are being created now that have, building big fan bases, and their music is AI generated, but there's something there, it's the face of it for people to latch onto and people to kind of buy into. As I said, I don't think if artists just sat there and just were threatened and didn't do anything about it, then it's their own fault. Really, to a point, there's always a way to kind of think about these things, and rather than just, because everyone in this room could effectively be put out of a job by AI at some point in the future. I'm not looking at a robot. I mean, it might have been cheaper to get a robot here than fly me here, but but I think if you think about it too dystopian, you'll never leave your room.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
It's also, I think, it's a logical step that AI is more and more into consideration and for these gaming platforms and Metaverse, because the whole licensing processes and everything is just way too complicated right now. It's just way too much work, to find out who are the rights holders, who is enabling me to play that piece of music in that specific game or whatever. We've seen that with GTA, for example, when you drive with the car, you had the radio stations and you skip through it. People love that because you hear different music. But for games like GTA, it's easy to get the licensing done because they're huge companies. But if you're a small platform or whatever, it's so difficult. And I think there needs to be big changes in how we license music for those platforms, for single users, etc. And that needs new concepts and new models all over. I think the conventional methods we have been using, with the typical CSV files and Excel sheets are probably not the right thing to do, and to go ahead in the future.
Great, thank you.
For example.
I'm joining the conversation. Thank you so far, and you can join as well if you have questions for the people up here. Not for me, but for the experts. Just type them in via swap card. And I have a first question here that someone in this room has for you. And it is, there's been a lot of discussion about the harm social media and the pressure of constantly being on, generating content, public-facing and sharing for artists and audiences alike. Is this being thought about in discussions about the metaverse? What is your take on that?
I think I touched on this earlier. Artists are, they're human beings, right? So there's only a certain amount of hours that you can kind of dedicate to being, to your obligations, and you're being pulled in various different directions. And as I said earlier, I think having a strategy in the metaverse that is kind of a virtual avatar. Version of your human self that can, perform and kind of interact in certain experiences. We just touched on AI. There's ways that you can automate some of this stuff as well. Ultimately, I think platforms and experiences and requirements are going to, for an artist, are just going to keep growing, and you can only be in one place at a time, and so I think yes, that is something that when I speak to artists and their teams, they're very aware of. Especially if you're a touring artist as well. You think about a 40-50 date world tour plus everything else. It's just unmanageable. So I think it's certainly something that is of a high priority for artists and their teams, and also for the platforms that are thinking about this in the right way. We're an artist-first platform. We have artists as part of our founding team. So the way we think is all about how can we benefit the artist the most? How can we make sure that they're paid properly? How can we make sure that that the requirements on them are as automated as they can be, not without losing the connection and the feeling of having the artist involved. But I think there's certainly tools and technologies that can be really used to help with the load. I'd say.
Okay, and then I have a question just coming in live. That is a bit of a second layer to that. In terms of communication, social media is in a moment of transition. Are there any plans here on the panel planning for communication strategy that excludes traditional social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, etc., to find new users and fans? Also fueling in on you can't do everything at once.
I'm not sure I will answer this question as a yes or a no, but last month we did release a mobile application for Pianity, and the core feature of this application is an in-app messaging system where artists can get in touch directly to the fans that collected their NFTs. So therefore, they have a tool and different channels to make their own promotion directly to the NFT holders of their songs. So they could choose to only communicate there.
I'd be asking why you would want to leave out TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, because there are people there spending hours a day on those platforms. It's attention, right? We're living in an attention economy, and our jobs as artists, managers, teams is to, well, it depends on what your objectives are, but it's to find new fans, right? So if you're ignoring those platforms, you're ignoring I think you're ignoring opportunity. And then this is to one of my points earlier around having an understanding of what channels do you want to operate in. If you're operating in Web 2, you've got to be in those platforms, right? It's kind of like with PR. Do you do traditional or digital? You might have a mixture of both. So it depends where the question's coming from, but as part of a strategy, you've got to take into account the Web 2 and Web 3 worlds that we are living in, whether you like them or not.
Okay, and then a question that I personally have, since I come from more of an outside perspective: how is the metaverse going to change my experience as a consumer, on a day-to-day base? What is going to be different? What are my benefits? Is there something I'm losing? What is your take?
I would say there's it's a difficult question really, but one thing is instant gratification. If you're in the metaverse and I'm playing a gig, there's ways to transact with me to get my attention, to send me a message, to request that I do something, to commission a song. The metaverse enables that direct-to-consumer, direct-to-artist transaction. So that for me is where, I'm not sure where the metaverse will go, but that for me is accessibility for fans and the artists. I'm sure how many, over the last few years, has Deadmau5 had fan interactions that 5-10 years ago would be just impossible, right?
Yep. Yeah, and we've Pixellinks as the business is as I said earlier, we invest in platforms as well. We've invested in a company called Volta, and what they're doing they're classed as a metaverse platform, but essentially they're plugging in visuals into live shows that can be changed and interacted with online. Currently, on YouTube, but that will happen in other sort of metaverse platforms where, through emojis or comments or keywords, you can change the look and feel of an entire. We did it at Brooklyn Mirage in New York, and change the entire surroundings of the show. And Alex, one of the founders, his mum was playing around on it in the kitchen and changing flames and all sorts of stuff going on, and these are metaverse experiences. That don't think of them necessarily as computer games. These are online experiences. So I think to your point about instant gratification or instant kind of connection, there's platforms like that out there that are really changing the way that fans interact with music and live experiences.
Because you brought up Volta as well, and we had good talks with them as well, and brought up the idea from my end. When we recognize music in a club or in a metaverse or whatever, and if the lighting is enabled by platforms or systems like Volta, you could write a whole script for that track. So once that track's playing, like a video in former days, you have the whole club, the whole metaverse experience changed on the way the creator intended it in the beginning. That could be included in an NFT. That leaves so much space for creativity for the artists themselves, also to engage with the fans at a later stage. So they recognize the music. You have your song played all over the world, and the club will always be the same kind of vibe that you want it to have. So that's just possibilities. That's not a rule. That's nothing that has to happen, but it could be a benefit for it,
Okay, and then maybe as a last question to close the round. Oh, you have a question.
Do you think that the smart contracts in the blockchain will ultimately disrupt the music industry as it is right now?
100%.
Quick answer.
Quick answer, yeah.
Quick answer.
Agreed.
That's good.
All of us.
No, absolutely, it will. how many of us like lawyers? Sorry, are there any lawyers in the room? Should probably ask that first. But smart contracts are optimizing the legal process. You know, it's basically if this, then that, but on steroids. There's a result. If I'm 5 minutes late, 5 minutes late to the speech, I'll donate £10 to charity. Automatically happens. You know, that smart contract is automation. It takes away all the middleman, and quite frankly, there's also opportunity for price discovery. You know, which for me is really, really fascinating. Is meritocracy, how to value art. Imagine if the crowd could actually decide, your audience and fan base could actually decide the value of your art. And smart contracts, I think, as a foundation layer for the music industry, it's one of the most exciting, innovative things to come to the industry, but it's also quite scary because of how the industry is so institutionalized and how the majors and the big organizations are scared.
Snoop Dogg just proved it with the Death Row catalog that he bought and took off from Spotify and is only through NFTs.
Absolutely. He's also one of the most well-known celebrities covering almost every corner of the globe, so he has the kind of perfect audience to succeed, but at the same time he's made some amazing use cases, right?
I just wanted to, not to be too much of a naysayer, yes, to smart contracts, but with anything else, and part of the reason the record industry as it stands has got into the mess that it has is inaccuracy of the data in the first place. So whether you're talking smart contracts, whether you're talking blockchain, whatever your database is going to be, if you put rubbish in, you get rubbish out. So really where we need to head to is accuracy of what goes in the first place. If you can get to that point, then the next iteration of the music industry is going to work a lot more successfully than this one. And that's been the problem for the music industry for the last, ever since it was born. Terrible data. The gatekeepers don't know what they're doing, or they obfuscate. So actually clean up the data, get accurate, and then things will work properly going forward.
Amen.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think that was quite a cool...